Apple's got a new Mac Pro, and it's almost everything everyone who loves the Mac Pro wanted. It's got a bunch of PCIe slots for expansion, all wrapped up in a mini tower case that can grate cheese in more dimensions than ever. If you want to, you can kick it up to 28 Xeon Cascade Lake cores and 1.5 terabytes of memory. That is, if you work for ILM or Pixar or Skywalker Audio, because just going out and buying those cores from Intel will cost you $7,500 to $10,000, and just getting that RAM from anyone will cost you another $20,000. Even the base config will start at 6K, which works out to roughly 3K worth of parts that most industry pros will just rip and replace with their own cards and network storage anyway. And 3K just for the case to hold and attach it all to. And if you think 3K for a case is a lot, wow, do I have a pro display stand to show you. Never mind the wheels. So many wheels. Or got anything made by Red or Hasselblad. But let's say you don't work for a company that makes Avengers movies and have jobs that let you bill 50K builds directly to mega corporations or pay them off in a few months, or involves the use of cameras that make the Mac Pro, even tricked out, look strangely normal by comparison, even for YouTube. Apple has said in the past that the vast majority of their customers buy iOS devices, not Macs, and the vast majority of their Mac customers buy notebooks, not desktops, and the vast majority of their desktop customers buy iMacs. But let's say that you, like me, are one of those few, those proud, those loud single-digit percentage Mac customers, and you want something for your desk that doesn't start at 5 or 6K. There's the iMac, sure, but there's also the Mac Mini Apple resurrected last October. It's not a tower, but you can stack it. It doesn't have any internal PCIe slots, but it does have Thunderbolt 3. So, I got to wondering just how far you could take it. Or rather, if you couldn't or wouldn't afford the Mac Pro, if you could take it far enough to make it into a Mac Mini Pro. To help me figure that out, I've invited one of my oldest, nerdiest friends and coworkers, including on iMore and these very videos, Anthony Casella. So hit subscribe, Thunderbolt that bell gizmo so YouTube actually lets you know when new videos go live, and then let's get into it. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rene.
Okay, so why did you want to look at the Mac Mini as an alternative to the new Mac Pro?
Well, it comes down to the cost. The new Mac Pro is amazing machinery, except that traditionally the Mac Pros started at the entry level around $3,000 US, and this one is almost $6,000.
Okay, so Apple introduced the new Mac Mini back in October, but they haven't refreshed it yet. So I think it's on Intel's 8th generation Coffee Lake and not 9th generation Coffee Lake refresh. What does that mean in terms of options exactly?
So you're limited to the highest spec, which is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. Although it boosts higher than the entry-level Mac Pro does right now, you're still missing those 2 cores and 4 threads. That might not be an issue for you if you're not using all the capabilities of the CPU, but it's nice to be on par if you can.
Yeah, and because the Mac Pro is using Cascade Lake Xeon processors, it's not apples to apples anyway, but now you're also doing 6-core compared to 8-core, so people just keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, on top of that, you have the Xeons, which happen to be enterprise-grade CPUs, which is for environments that you have to have full high availability at all times. So we're using consumer-level CPUs, but if you're not in that environment, it might be a good way to go.
What about stacking Mac Minis? We've all seen those pictures now where they have multiple Mac Minis stacked on top of each other. What does that give you?
If you have any sort of network that has multiple Apple computers on it, you can use something like Compressor, let's say, to have a distributed computational system. So that just aids. And if you have the 10 gigabit connection, you have multiple Mac Minis together, you just have that much more processing power.
So memory, the same thing, right? Instead of ECC memory and up to 1.5 terabytes, what do you have with the Mac Mini?
You can get up to 64 gigabytes of memory, non-ECC. Again, if you don't need error-correcting memory, then that might not be an issue for you. At the entry level of the Mac Pro, it starts at 32 gigabytes, and that's easily configurable on the Mac Mini as well.
Okay, and then storage. Obviously, the Mac, well, they both have the T2 chip, so you're getting secure storage with whatever you put in there. The Mac Pro does have some PCIe slots that you can use to expand internal storage. There's a Promise card already, one of those new Mac expansion card slots that just basically, I think they put 4 drives into 2 slots. With the Mac Mini, though, there's no room inside that little box for anything internal.
No, you have to choose. If you want a lot of internal storage, then you're going to have to choose that at the beginning because you can't upgrade that after the fact. However, it does have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports on there, which are plenty fast, and also 2 USB 3.1 ports on there. In a way, that might be even preferable. Because
yeah, that's one of the big advantages. One of the big recommendations I used to make to people was never put a lot of internal storage into anything that is an appliance, like a Mac Mini, an iMac, a MacBook, anything like that, because if anything goes wrong, you can't just take the storage enclosure in, or you can't just swap the storage enclosure out. You basically have to take your machine in. I've changed my opinion somewhat now that I deal with really big Final Cut Pro files, but I've gone back and forth because the new Samsung external X5, X2, X5. I always get those mixed up with X-Men movies, but they are so fast. I mean, you'll pay Apple level, or I guess I should just call it premium level SSD prices for it. I think mine was $1,500 or something for 2 terabytes, but that starts to make the internal external boundaries blur a little bit for me.
Another thing that I do to make it easier for me is that I will add symbolic links on my main drive to point to my external drives so that it's kind of seamless for me. So I don't really notice that I'm writing to an external drive. I don't actually have to physically change anything or in my configurations. It kind of just does that. I do that for my documents, my downloads, my movie libraries, things like that.
All right, and the new Mac Pro has 2 Ethernet ports built right into the power supply. The Mac Mini has 1, but how far can you take that 1 slot?
Well, there's an option, I think it's for $100, that you can upgrade that network interface to 10 gigabit. It's only 1. You only get 1 on the Mac Mini. But I mean, these things, you can get around that by using a switch, a 10 gigabit switch as well. If you need multiple IP addresses, there are workarounds that you can do, some configuration options, especially at the command line, that you can add as many virtual Ethernet ports, Ethernet IPs as you need.
All right, so GPUs. Now, I'm guessing this might be where things get more interesting because with the new Mac Pro, they showed that you can not only throw a bunch of I was going to say NVIDIA, never NVIDIA. You can throw a bunch of AMD cards into there, and you can even use those fancy new Mac Pro expander slots to put a dual GPU in there for mind-altering speeds. But what can you do with the Mac Mini?
Well, you're not going to get access to those new specialized custom cards from AMD that have a dual GPU, that's for sure. But
Infinity Fabric.
Yeah, right. No, we're not going to get that, at least not yet. The internal GPU is just the Intel onboard GPU, which is not that great. It does have quick sync, though, if you're using some sort of hardware acceleration. What you can do is get an external GPU. You can get multiple external GPUs. I mean, if you have enough Thunderbolt ports that are free, a couple for your hard drives and a couple for eGPUs, you can have multiple GPUs connected to your Mac Mini.
And I got a chance to talk to Cinema 4D about it, and they had a number of eGPUs slaved to a machine that was so high, Apple PR was not comfortable with me disclosing it.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? Maybe we should try that. But there are some caveats with that, with the eGPU. Thunderbolt 3, as great as it is, does have some limitations. You do have some bottlenecking that occurs when trying to access your GPU. For example, if you add an AMD RX 580, which is the standard AMD GPU, I think the Mac Pro comes with a similar spec one with some Pro drivers on there, but it's effectively the same GPU. You'll get about a 20% reduction in performance because of the Thunderbolt 3 interface. One trade-off is that Apple allows for you to have a connected eGPU, yet you don't necessarily have to have a monitor connected to that eGPU to use it. That being said, if you are accessing that external GPU with doing graphical work, and you are not using a display connected to that eGPU, the Thunderbolt 3 connection gets saturated in 2 directions. One, accessing the GPU, and then bringing the graphics back onto your display that's being displayed, let's say, on your Mac Mini through the iGPU. that's going to have a performance hit. You can mitigate that, of course, by adding a display to the external GPU. It's probably a preferred way to do things.
All right, so when you're pricing these things out, you mentioned before this new Mac Pro is the highest entry-level cost Mac Pro ever, starting at $6,000.
By double.
Yeah, by double. How much does your Mac Mini equivalent end up pricing out at?
So we went with 32 gigabytes of memory, the 10 gigabit connection Ethernet, the highest spec CPU available on the Mac Mini for now, which is the 6-core 12-thread. I think it boosts to 4.5 gigahertz. With an external GPU, we use the Sonnet eGPU as the enclosure, and an AMD RX 580, which is around $200 right now. You can get better, of course. And that came to around $3,500 US.
All right, so for people, who had lust in their hearts for a new Mac Pro, but this Mac Pro ended up being higher end than they were willing to go for, or could afford to go for, do you think the Mac Mini is a viable alternative for all of them, some of them?
Well, I will say, if I had my preference, I would definitely want to have a Mac Pro if I could afford it. I would definitely prefer to have PCIe slots that I can have direct access to. However, with the Mac Mini, for example, if I was to buy like the cheapest Mac Mini with the highest CPU processors available to me, if there's an upgrade someday with the Mac Mini that I get more CPU cores or whatever, if we go back to what I was saying, having external hard drives, external GPU, I can just upgrade that Mac Mini and still have access to my other hardware and not really lose much of my environment. I also don't have to pay as much money to get that upgrade.
So in essence, this is almost like the modular Mac Pro that was rumored, like a red camera or something, where you can buy the brain module, then buy anything else you need, but also swap out that brain module if and when you need to.
Well, that's right. I think people were just waiting for the Mac Pro to actually jump on this type of idea.
And what about comparing this to a Hackintosh, for example, if people just say, F it, I'm going to build my own?
Well, you can get a better or a similar performing computer if you build it yourself and spec it out exactly to what the Mac Pro, the new Mac Pro has. But you're dealing with a lot of configuration issues, a lot of update issues. Things can break at any moment. If you don't want all of that headache, and if you need to have an Apple environment, if you're using Final Cut Pro, for example, then you're not going to want to mess around with all of the configurations that you have to go through with the Hackintosh.
The Hackintoshery.
That's right.
All right, awesome. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Renee.
This is normally the part where I tell people where to find you on social, but you hate that stuff and long ago obliterated what tiny social media footprint you had, so I'll just direct everyone to your work on iMore and they can check you out there. Now, if you want to obliterate pollutants and allergens the way Anthony obliterated social media, check out Molecule. I've been using mine going on 6 months. I bought it all by myself after seeing some nerdy folks in Silicon Valley showing off the results they were getting following the wildfires, and it was amazing. That's because Molecule has technology that's capable of destroying air pollutants at a molecular level. Its technology has been verified by science, but more importantly, it's been tested by real people in the real world, and that's what makes it so compelling to me. Molecule helped allergy and asthma sufferers around the country better cope with their conditions and significantly reduce their symptoms. To get yours, go to molecule.com, that's MOLEKULE.com, and enter Vector at checkout to save $75. Thanks, Molecule, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. So, right now, fans of a truly desktop, not all-in-one Mac are stuck between a super premium Mac Pro and a mini hard case. There's no half-height, half-slot, mid-range tower midway in between. Could Apple release something like that one day? Maybe, and I really want to talk about that possibility in another video. For now though, you'd either have to get an entry-level Mac Pro or even iMac Pro, which is a terrific machine but still really expensive, or you'd have to get a Mac Mini and attach everything you need to it, though as an outie, not an innie, but it might just make you happier. Hit like, hit subscribe, it really helps out the show, and then hit up the comments below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching, see you next video.